My ex held our baby first. My husband saw it and abandoned me right there in the hospital. Now he wants me back but discovered I'm not who he thought I was. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. My ex held our baby first. My husband saw it and abandoned me right there in the hospital room, leaving me alone with our newborn son while I was still bleeding from delivery. 3 months later, he showed up at my door begging for another chance. But by then, he had no idea what he'd actually walked away from. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, and the day my son Oliver was born was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day my marriage died, and a betrayal I never saw coming was finally exposed. The delivery room was cold. I remember that detail so clearly because everything else from that moment exists in fragments, like shattered glass I'm still trying to piece together. I'd been in labor for 19 hours. The contractions had started at 2 in the morning, and by 9 p.m. I was finally holding my baby boy, Oliver Marcus Mitchell, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect tiny fingers that wrapped around mine the moment the nurse placed him on my chest. But I only got to hold him for maybe 30 seconds before everything fell apart. My husband Daniel was standing on my left side, his hand still gripping mine from the final pushes. He'd been supportive throughout the pregnancy, attending every doctor's appointment, reading parenting books, painting the nursery a soft sage green that I'd picked out. We'd been married for 4 years, together for 6. High school sweethearts who'd made it work through college, through starting careers, through buying our first house. I thought we were solid. I thought we were forever. Then the delivery room door opened. I heard it before I saw who it was. The soft whoosh of the automatic door, followed by footsteps that I recognized immediately even through my exhaustion. My entire body went rigid. Daniel felt it too because his hand tightened on mine, his voice sharp when he spoke. What the hell is he doing here? Ryan Collins, my ex-boyfriend from before Daniel, the man I'd dated for 2 years in my early 20s before we'd broken up over his inability to commit to anything serious. I hadn't seen him in over 7 years, hadn't spoken to him in 6, and yet there he was, walking into my delivery room like he had every right to be there, his eyes finding the baby in my arms with an expression I couldn't read. "Sarah," Ryan said, his voice rough with emotion I didn't understand. "I got here as fast as I could. Traffic from the airport was insane." "Get out," Daniel said immediately, stepping between Ryan and the hospital bed. "You have no business being here. This is my wife, my son." The nurse who'd been checking my vitals looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden tension. "I'm sorry, but only immediate family is allowed in the delivery room. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." But Ryan didn't move. He was staring at Oliver with this intense focus that made my stomach twist. "Sarah, please, I need to talk to you. It's important." "There's nothing to talk about," I managed to say, though my voice was weak from exhaustion. "Ryan, you need to leave. This isn't appropriate." That's when Ryan pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking as he scrolled through something, then held it up so I could see the screen. It was a text message thread between him and someone named Jennifer Harlow. The name meant nothing to me, but the messages made my blood run cold. "She told me 3 months ago," Ryan said, his voice breaking. "Jennifer works at the fertility clinic you went to. She's my cousin. She called me when she saw your name in the system and recognized it. Sarah, the embryo implantation, the one that created Oliver, it used my genetic material by mistake. There was a mix-up with the samples. The clinic is trying to keep it quiet, but Jennifer couldn't let me not know. That baby, he's biologically mine." The room went completely silent. Even the machines seemed to stop beeping. I couldn't process what Ryan had just said. It didn't make sense. Daniel and I had gone through in vitro fertilization because he had fertility issues, low sperm count that made natural conception nearly impossible. We'd used his sperm, gone through the whole process, spent thousands of dollars. The clinic had assured us everything was perfect. "That's impossible," Daniel said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "We used my sample. They confirmed it multiple times." Ryan's expression was anguished. "There was a labeling error. My sample was in the system from 2 years ago, when I did a donation for my sister who was going through IVF. Somehow your embryo got matched with my sample instead of Daniel's. Jennifer showed me the internal documents. She could lose her job for telling me, but she thought I deserved to know." I looked down at Oliver, still in my arms, his tiny face peaceful as he slept. My son, the baby I'd carried for 9 months, felt kick and move, talked to every night, and Daniel was staring at him now like he was a stranger. "Daniel," I whispered, tears starting to stream down my face. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But he was already backing away from the bed, his face pale, his eyes filled with something I'd never seen before. Betrayal, disgust, like I'd personally orchestrated this nightmare, like I'd cheated on him instead of being a victim of a medical mistake. "Don't," he said when I reached for him. "Just don't. Mr. Mitchell, please." The nurse tried, but Daniel was already at the door. "That's not my son," he said, his voice hollow. I can't do this." And then he was gone, just walked out of the delivery room, out of the hospital, out of my life in the span of 30 seconds. I started sobbing, my body shaking so hard that the nurse took Oliver from my arms, worried I might drop him. Through my tears, I saw Ryan step closer, his hand reaching out like he wanted to comfort me but didn't know if he should. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he said. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I needed to see him. I needed to know." "Get out," I managed through my tears. "Please, just get out." Ryan looked at Oliver one more time, something desperate and paternal in his gaze, then nodded. "I'll go. But Sarah, we need to talk about this, about what this means. I'm not trying to ruin your life, but that's my son too now, legally, biologically." After he left, the room felt even colder. The nurse tried to comfort me, bringing Oliver back once I'd calmed down enough. She didn't ask questions, just quietly finished her checks and left me alone with my thoughts and my baby. I tried calling Daniel almost 17 times that night. Every call went straight to voicemail. I texted him, begged him to come back to talk to me, to at least see Oliver before he made any decisions. Nothing. My best friend Melissa arrived around midnight after I finally broke down and called her. She found me in the hospital bed, Oliver sleeping in the bassinet beside me, my eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say anything at first, just climbed into the bed next to me and held me while I cried all over again. He just left, I kept saying. He looked at Oliver like he was nothing, like I was nothing. Melissa stroked my hair, her jaw tight with anger on my behalf. Daniel is a coward. This isn't your fault, Sarah. You didn't do anything wrong. But it felt like I had. Even though rationally, I knew the clinic had made the mistake. Even though I'd done everything right, followed every protocol, been faithful and honest, I felt like I'd somehow failed everyone. Failed Daniel, failed Oliver, failed myself. The next morning, a lawyer showed up at my hospital room. He was representing Daniel, serving me with separation papers before I'd even been discharged. The betrayal of it, the coldness, it broke something in me that I didn't know could break. 4 years of marriage, 6 years together, and he couldn't even face me himself. Just sent a lawyer with paperwork while I was still recovering from giving birth to a child I'd wanted with my whole heart. I signed the papers. What choice did I have? Daniel had made his decision. He wanted nothing to do with Oliver, nothing to do with me. The lawyer mentioned something about paternity testing, about Daniel wanting to ensure he had no legal obligation to the child since they weren't biologically related. I barely heard him. I was numb. Melissa helped me pack my hospital bags the next day. Neither of us said much. What was there to say? My life had imploded in less than 48 hours. I went home to the house Daniel and I had bought together, the nursery he'd helped paint, the crib he'd assembled, but Daniel wasn't there. His clothes were gone from the closet, his toiletries cleared from the bathroom. He'd packed up and left while I was in the hospital, didn't even have the decency to face me. The only thing he'd left was a note on the kitchen counter, 4 sentences that somehow hurt worse than everything else combined. I can't raise another man's child. I can't look at him and not see the lie. I'm sorry it ended this way. Take care of yourself. I crumpled the note and threw it across the kitchen, then collapsed on the floor and sobbed. Oliver was upstairs sleeping, oblivious to the disaster his birth had caused. My innocent, perfect baby boy who'd done nothing wrong, but whose existence had destroyed my marriage. For the next 3 months, I survived more than lived. My mother came to stay with me for the first 6 weeks, helping with Oliver since I was doing everything alone. The postpartum recovery was brutal enough without adding the emotional devastation of abandonment and divorce. But somehow I managed. I figured out how to nurse, how to soothe Oliver when he cried, how to function on 2 hours of sleep. I became a mother because I had no other choice. Daniel never called, never texted, never asked about Oliver or how I was managing. It was like we'd never existed to him. Like 4 years of marriage could be erased the moment things got complicated. The divorce moved forward with cold efficiency. He didn't fight me on the house, didn't ask for any custody or visitation rights with Oliver. He just wanted out, wanted to pretend none of this had ever happened. Ryan, on the other hand, wouldn't leave me alone. He called constantly those first few weeks, texting, asking to see Oliver, asking if we could talk about what this meant legally. I ignored him. I couldn't deal with him on top of everything else. Eventually, he backed off, but I knew it wasn't over. He'd made it clear he considered Oliver his son, and that was a problem I'd have to face eventually. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Something that would change everything and make me question everything I thought I knew about betrayal, about trust, about the man I'd married. It started with a phone call from Jennifer Harlow. Jennifer Harlow called me on a Tuesday afternoon when Oliver was exactly 11 weeks old. I was in the middle of changing a diaper, my phone buzzing on the changing table beside me. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer anyway. Sarah Mitchell, a woman's voice, professional but nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Jennifer Harlow. I work at Riverside Fertility Clinic. I'm Ryan Collins's cousin, the one who told him about the embryo mix-up. She paused, and I could hear her breathing heavily like she was walking quickly. I need to meet with you, today, if possible. There's something you need to know about what really happened. My hand stilled on Oliver's onesie. What do you mean what really happened? You told Ryan there was a sample mix-up, that Oliver isn't Daniel's biological son. That's what I was told to say, Jennifer replied, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But Sarah, I've been going through the clinic's records more carefully. Something isn't right. The dates don't match up. The sample labeling, the procedural notes, there are inconsistencies everywhere. I think someone deliberately switched those samples. I felt my knees go weak. I sat down hard on the floor next to the changing table, Oliver kicking his legs happily above me, oblivious to my shock. That's impossible. Who would do that? Why? That's what I need to talk to you about in person, Jennifer said. I can't discuss this over the phone. My job is already on the line for telling Ryan about the mix-up in the first place. But if what I suspect is true, this goes way deeper than a simple clerical error. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on Maple Street, the one near the hospital? I get off work in 2 hours. I agreed because what else could I do? After we hung up, I sat there on the nursery floor for a long time, trying to process what she'd said. Someone deliberately switched the samples. But why? Who would benefit from Daniel thinking Oliver wasn't his son? Who would want to destroy my marriage? I called Melissa, asked if she could watch Oliver for a few hours. She agreed immediately, no questions asked, which was one of the many reasons I loved her. She arrived within 30 minutes, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. What happened? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I think I'm about to find out why my life fell apart. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Jennifer was already there, sitting at a corner table with her back to the wall. She was younger than I expected, maybe 28 or 29, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and exhaustion written all over her face. She stood when she saw me, her hands twisting nervously. Sarah Sarah, thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. I know this must be incredibly difficult for you. Just tell me what you found, I said, too tired for pleasantries. Jennifer pulled out a folder from her bag, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention to us. Okay, so here's what I know. 3 months ago, I was doing routine database maintenance when I noticed your name in our system. I recognized it because Ryan had mentioned you years ago when he did his donation for his sister's IVF. I pulled up your file out of curiosity, and that's when I saw the discrepancy. She opened the folder, showing me a series of printed documents covered in medical jargon and identification numbers. Your embryo was created using sample number 7439B. According to our records, that's Ryan's sample. But here's the thing. When I went back through the original intake forms from the day of your procedure, the paperwork clearly states sample 7439A was supposed to be used, Daniel's sample. So it was just a clerical error, I said, feeling disappointed despite myself. Someone wrote B instead of A. That's what I thought at first, Jennifer continued. But then I checked the logs of who accessed your file in the weeks leading up to your procedure. And Sarah, someone went into the digital system and changed the sample designation from A to B 2 days before your embryo transfer. Not a mistake, a deliberate alteration. My heart started pounding. Who changed it? Jennifer bit her lip, hesitating. That's where this gets complicated. The login credentials used to make the change belong to Dr. Marcus Webb, one of our senior fertility specialists. But I've worked with Dr. Webb for 3 years, and he's meticulous about following protocol. He would never make a change like that without documentation, without a reason. So I confronted him about it yesterday. And what did he say? He denied it completely. Said he never accessed your file except during your initial consultation. So I had our IT department pull the login records, and Sarah, the access happened at 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday night. Dr. Webb wasn't even at the clinic that night. He was at a medical conference in Chicago. I verified it with his travel receipts. I felt cold all over. So someone used his login credentials to change my file. Exactly, Jennifer confirmed. And there's only one person who would have both access to Dr. Webb's login information and a motive to want your husband to think Oliver wasn't his biological son. Who? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer based on the dread pooling in my stomach. Jennifer pulled out one more document, this time a printout of security camera footage timestamped to that Thursday night. The image was grainy but clear enough. A woman sitting at one of the clinic's computers, her face partially visible in profile. I recognized her immediately, even though I'd only met her a handful of times. That's Victoria, I whispered. Daniel's sister. Jennifer nodded grimly. Victoria Mitchell works in medical billing at the hospital adjacent to our clinic. She has access to the shared computer systems between facilities. And according to what I could dig up, she accessed Dr. Webb's account using administrative override credentials 3 minutes before your file was altered. I couldn't breathe. Daniel's sister had sabotaged my IVF procedure, had deliberately ensured that Ryan's sample was used instead of Daniel's, had destroyed my marriage, had caused Daniel to abandon me and Oliver, all intentionally. But why? What could she possibly gain from ruining my life? I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. Why would Victoria do this? She was always nice to me. We weren't close, but she never seemed to hate me. I've been trying to figure that out too, Jennifer admitted. So I did some digging into Victoria's background, called in a few favors with people who know her. Sarah, did you know that Daniel has a trust fund? A substantial one that he was supposed to access when he turned 35? I nodded slowly. Yes, his grandfather left money for him and Victoria both, but Daniel never talked about it much. He wanted to build his career on his own merit, not rely on family money. Right, but there's a clause in the trust that most people don't know about, Jennifer explained. I have a friend who works in estate law, and she was able to pull some public records. If Daniel were to divorce before turning 35, which he is next year, 50% of his trust allocation would revert to Victoria. It's an old provision meant to discourage young marriages and divorces in the family. The grandfather was apparently very traditional about that kind of thing. The pieces started clicking together in my mind, forming a picture so ugly I almost couldn't accept it. She wanted us to divorce. She engineered the entire situation so Daniel would leave me, and she could get his money. That's my theory, Jennifer confirmed. And there's more. I checked Victoria's financial records, public information, tax liens, that kind of thing. She's drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, medical bills from some kind of elective surgery. Her mortgage is 3 months behind. She needs money desperately. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. Victoria had destroyed my marriage, had caused my husband to abandon our newborn son, all for money. She'd manipulated the fertility clinic records, had ensured Ryan would find out about the mix-up through Jennifer, had orchestrated everything so precisely that Daniel never questioned whether Oliver might actually be his biological son. She just let him assume the worst and walk away. Does Ryan know about this? I asked. That Jennifer is his cousin, that she told him about the mix-up. Was that part of Victoria's plan too? Jennifer's face flushed. I'm ashamed to admit this, but yes, Victoria approached me about a month before you gave birth. She knew Ryan was my cousin, knew I worked at the fertility clinic. She offered me money, $20,000, to tell Ryan about the sample mix-up as soon as your baby was born. She said it was because she thought Ryan deserved to know he was going to be a father, that it was the ethical thing to do. And you believed her, I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. I did it first, Jennifer admitted miserably. I was behind on student loans, and $20,000 seemed like a miracle. But the more I thought about it after Oliver was born, after seeing what happened to you and Daniel, the more wrong it felt. That's why I started investigating. I needed to know if I'd been part of something horrible. You were, I said flatly. You helped destroy my marriage. marriage. I know, Jennifer whispered, tears starting to fall, and I will never forgive myself for that. But Sarah, I'm trying to make it right now. These documents, this evidence, it proves that the sample mix-up was deliberate. It proves Victoria manipulated everything. You can use this to fight back. I took the folder from her, my hands trembling. Inside was everything she'd found. The login records showing Victoria's access to the system, the altered file documentation, the security camera footage, printouts of text messages between Victoria and Jennifer arranging the payment. It was all there. A complete record of betrayal orchestrated by the woman who was supposed to be my sister-in-law. There's one more thing you should know, Jennifer said quietly. The original sample, the one that was supposed to be used, Daniel's sample. I went back and checked the genetic markers against standard fertility profiles. Sarah, Daniel's sperm count wasn't as low as you both were told. In fact, it was completely normal. Someone falsified those test results to push you toward IVF in the first place. My breath caught in my throat. We could have conceived naturally. Most likely, yes, Jennifer confirmed. The whole thing was a setup from the beginning. Victoria must have altered Daniel's fertility test results, convinced you both that IVF was necessary, then sabotaged the procedure itself. She was thorough. I'll give her that. I sat there in that coffee shop for a long time, staring at the folder in my hands. Evidence of a conspiracy so calculated, so cruel, that it defied comprehension. Victoria had spent months, maybe longer, planning how to destroy my marriage, and she'd succeeded. Daniel was gone. Oliver would grow up without his father, and all because of greed. But now I had proof. Now I could fight back. What are you going to do? Jennifer asked nervously. I looked up at her, and I'm sure my expression must have been frightening because she actually leaned back in her chair. I'm going to tell Daniel everything. I'm going to show him what his sister did, and then I'm going to make sure Victoria pays for what she's done to my family. Jennifer nodded slowly. I'll testify if you need me to. It's the least I can do after my part in this. After leaving the coffee shop, I drove around for an hour, the folder sitting on my passenger seat like it was burning a hole through the leather. I kept thinking about Daniel, about the way he'd looked at Oliver in that delivery room, the disgust, the betrayal. He'd thought I'd somehow deceived him, that the baby I was holding was proof of infidelity, even though intellectually he knew that wasn't possible. But emotions don't follow logic, and Victoria had known that. She'd counted on it. By the time I got home, Oliver was sleeping peacefully in Melissa's arms. She took one look at my face and knew something major had happened. Tell me, she demanded. So I did. I laid out everything Jennifer had told me, showed her the documents, explained Victoria's motive. Melissa's face went through several expressions: shock, rage, disgust, before settling on grim determination. You need to go to Daniel, she said. Tonight, right now. Show him this evidence before Victoria has any chance to cover her tracks or spin this somehow. He won't want to see me, I protested. He made it clear he wants nothing to do with me or Oliver. Then make him see you, Melissa insisted. Sarah, this is your marriage. This is Oliver's father. You can't let Victoria win. You have to fight for your family. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of facing Daniel after 3 months of silence, of rejection, of abandonment, it terrified me. What if he didn't believe me? What if he thought I was making excuses? What if he simply didn't care anymore? But I had to try. For Oliver. For the family we were supposed to be. I asked Melissa to watch Oliver overnight, packed the folder into my bag, and drove to the apartment Daniel had moved into after leaving our house. It was in a new development downtown, sterile and impersonal. I sat in my car outside for 15 minutes, building up the courage to go inside. Finally, I forced myself to get out and walk to his door. I knocked 3 times before he answered. When the door opened, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes widened when he saw me, a complicated mix of emotions crossing his face. Sarah, he said, my name coming out like a question. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Can I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was sparse, barely furnished, boxes still stacked in corners like he hadn't fully committed to unpacking. We stood in the living room, an awkward distance between us, neither of us knowing how to start. How's the baby? Daniel finally asked, not quite able to say Oliver's name. He's perfect, I replied. He has your eyes, your smile. He's beautiful, Daniel. Daniel flinched like I'd struck him. Don't do that. Don't try to make me feel something for a child that isn't mine. But he is yours, I said, pulling the folder from my bag. That's what I came here to tell you. Daniel, you need to see this. You need to know what really happened. Over the next hour, I walked him through everything. The altered records, Victoria's access to the system, the falsified fertility tests, the financial motive. I watched his face change as he processed each piece of evidence, saw the moment when understanding clicked into place and then transformed into fury. My sister did this, he said, his voice hollow with shock. Victoria destroyed our marriage for money. Yes, I confirmed. She manipulated everything. The fertility tests, the sample switch, telling Ryan through Jennifer. All of it was calculated to make you think Oliver wasn't yours, so you divorced me before you turned 35. Daniel sank onto his couch, his head in his hands. I left you. I left our son. Oh God, Sarah, what have I done? You did what anyone would do faced with that situation, I said, though the words felt hollow. Part of me was still angry at him for abandoning us so easily. But Daniel, we need to do something about this. We need to confront Victoria, maybe get lawyers involved. She can't get away with what she did to us. He looked up at me, his eyes red. First, I need to meet my son, properly this time. Can I do that? Can I come see Oliver? My heart clenched. After 3 months of doing everything alone, of crying myself to sleep, of wondering if Oliver would ever know his father, here was Daniel asking for a second chance. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to forgive everything and move forward. But another part, the part that had been broken by his abandonment, hesitated. I need to know you're not going to leave again, I said quietly. I need to know that if things get hard, if Victoria tries something else, you're going to stay and fight. Because Oliver and I, we can't go through this again. Daniel stood up, crossed the space between us, and took my hands in his. I swear to you, Sarah, I'm not going anywhere. I was a coward 3 months ago, but I'm not that man anymore. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix us. I wanted to believe him, desperately. But trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. Then prove it, I said, pulling my hands away. Help me take down Victoria. Help me make sure she never hurts another family the way she hurt ours. Do that, and maybe we can start rebuilding what she destroyed. Daniel nodded, his jaw set with determination I hadn't seen in years. When do we start? We started the next morning. Daniel arrived at the house at 8 a.m. sharp, looking nervous as he stood on the doorstep of the home he'd abandoned 3 months earlier. I let him in without a word, leading him upstairs to the nursery where Oliver was just waking up from his morning nap. The moment Daniel saw him, really saw him this time without the filter of betrayal clouding his vision, he broke down. He stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down his face as Oliver kicked his legs and made happy babbling sounds from his crib. Can I? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. I nodded, stepping back to give him space. Daniel approached the crib slowly, like he was afraid Oliver might disappear if he moved too quickly. When he finally picked up our son, cradling him carefully against his chest, the sob that escaped him was raw and broken. I'm so sorry, he whispered to Oliver, who was staring up at him with curious blue eyes. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I'm your dad, and I should have been here from the beginning. Oliver reached up, his tiny hand grabbing onto Daniel's finger. That simple gesture seemed to shatter whatever walls Daniel had built around himself. He sank into the rocking chair, holding Oliver close, and cried like I'd never seen him cry before. I left them alone, giving Daniel the privacy to meet his son properly for the first time. When I came back 30 minutes later, Daniel was still holding Oliver, but he'd composed himself. There was something different in his expression now, a fierce protectiveness that hadn't been there before. I'm going to destroy her, he said quietly. Victoria doesn't get to do this to our family and walk away untouched. We need to be smart about this, I replied, sitting down on the floor near the rocking chair. If we just confront her directly, she'll deny everything. We need more evidence, something irrefutable. Daniel nodded, gently bouncing Oliver as he thought, the trust fund. That's her motive, her weak point. If we can prove she knew about the inheritance clause and deliberately tried to trigger my divorce, that could be enough for a civil case at minimum. Jennifer said she has text messages between herself and Victoria arranging the payment, I reminded him. But Victoria could claim that was just her being generous, helping Jennifer with her loans. We need something that explicitly shows her intent to sabotage our marriage. What about her financial records? Daniel suggested. If she's as deep in debt as Jennifer said, there should be a paper trail. Credit card statements, loan applications, maybe even communications with creditors. If we can show she was desperate for money right before she started this scheme, it establishes motive. I considered that. How do we get access to her financial records? That's private information. Not if she's committed fraud, Daniel countered. We have evidence she illegally accessed medical systems, falsified records, and conspired to manipulate a fertility procedure. That's enough to file a police report. Once law enforcement is involved, they can subpoena her financial records as part of the investigation. It made sense, but something about it felt incomplete. Victoria had been so careful, so calculated in her planning, she wouldn't have left obvious trails unless she was certain they couldn't be traced back to her. We needed something more. Something that would catch her off guard before she had time to cover her tracks. That's when I remembered something Daniel had told me years ago, back when we first got married. Victoria kept a journal, had since they were kids. She wrote down everything, her thoughts, her plans, her frustrations. It was a habit their mother had encouraged, a way to process emotions. If Victoria had documented any part of her scheme, if she'd written down her plans or her justifications, that journal would be a smoking gun. Does Victoria still keep a journal? I asked Daniel. He looked surprised by the question, then understanding dawned. Yes, she does. Multiple volumes at this point. She keeps them locked in a safe in her bedroom closet. If we could get access to that safe, if there's anything in those journals about her plan, I started. That's breaking and entering, Daniel interrupted. We can't just break into her house. But you can, I pointed out. You're her brother. If you showed up at her place, she'd let you in. You could distract her while I searched her room. Daniel hesitated, shifting Oliver in his arms. That's risky. If she catches us, she'll know we're onto her. She'll have time to destroy evidence. Then we don't give her that time, I said, my mind racing through possibilities. We go to the police first, file the report with Jennifer's evidence. While they're processing that, while Victoria thinks she's still safe, we visit her. You tell her you've been thinking about reconciling with me, that you want her advice as your sister. Keep her occupied downstairs while I go through her things. And if we find something in the journals, we photograph it with our phones, put everything back exactly as we found it, and turn the photos over to the police. They can use it to strengthen their case when they bring her in for questioning. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Oliver, who had fallen asleep against his chest. This could blow up in our faces. Victoria isn't stupid. She'll suspect something if I suddenly show up wanting to talk after 3 months of no contact. Then we make it believable, I insisted. Tell her I came to you with some story about the IVF clinic making a mistake, that I'm trying to manipulate you into coming back. Ask her opinion on whether you should believe me. She'll think she's still in control, that her plan is working. She won't see us coming. It took another hour of planning, of going over every detail and potential complication, before Daniel finally agreed. We would go to the police station that afternoon, file a formal complaint with all of Jennifer's evidence. Then, while the wheels of bureaucracy slowly turned, we would visit Victoria and search for the final piece of fruit we needed. The police took us more more seriously than I expected. The detective assigned to our case, a woman named Detective Lisa Park, reviewed Jennifer's documentation with sharp, focused attention. She asked detailed questions about the timeline, about Victoria's access to the medical systems, about the financial motive. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, she had enough to open an official investigation into medical fraud and conspiracy. This is going to take time, Detective Park warned us. We'll need to verify the digital evidence, interview witnesses, build a case strong enough to bring charges. In the meantime, do not confront Victoria Mitchell directly. Do not do anything that could jeopardize this investigation or give her reason to destroy evidence. Daniel and I exchanged a quick glance but said nothing. What the detective didn't know wouldn't hurt her. We needed that journal, and we couldn't risk Victoria having time to get rid of it once she learned about the police investigation. That evening, Daniel called Victoria. I sat next to him on the couch, Oliver asleep in my arms, listening to his side of the conversation. "Hey, Vic, it's me," Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral. "I know we haven't talked since everything happened, but something came up and I need your advice. Can I come over tomorrow? Around noon? Great, yeah, see you then." After he hung up, Daniel looked at me with grim determination. She said yes, sounded surprised but happy to hear from me. She has no idea what's coming. The next day arrived with agonizing slowness. Melissa agreed to watch Oliver again, asking no questions when I told her Daniel and I had something important to do. She just hugged me tight and whispered, "Go get justice." Victoria's house was in an upscale neighborhood on the north side of the city, a beautiful 2-story colonial that she absolutely could not afford on her medical billing salary. More evidence of her financial desperation, of her willingness to live beyond her means. Daniel and I sat in the car outside for a few minutes, going over the plan one more time. "I'll keep her downstairs. Maybe suggest we go out to the back patio since it's nice outside," Daniel said. "That'll give you clear access to the second floor without her hearing you move around. Her bedroom is the first door on the left at the top of the stairs. The safe is in her closet. Combination is her birthday, 0823. "How do you know the combination?" I asked. "She's not creative with passwords," Daniel replied with a tight smile. "Uses the same codes for everything. I helped her reset her phone once and saw her pattern. If she's changed it, we're screwed, but I doubt she has." We got out of the car and Daniel rang the doorbell. Victoria answered within seconds, her face lighting up when she saw her brother. "Danny!" she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug. Then she noticed me standing behind him, and her expression shifted to confusion and barely concealed displeasure. "Sarah, I didn't know you were coming too." "I hope that's okay," I said, forcing a friendly tone. Daniel thought it might be good for us to talk, clear the air about some things. Victoria's smile was strained as she stepped back to let us in. "Of course, come in. I was just making coffee." The house was immaculate, decorated in a modern minimalist style that probably cost a fortune. More evidence of Victoria's spending habits, of the debt she'd accumulated trying to maintain appearances. I filed that observation away as we followed her toward the kitchen. "So what did you want to talk about?" Victoria asked, pouring coffee into expensive-looking mugs. "You sounded serious on the phone, Danny." "It's about Sarah and Oliver," Daniel began, and I saw Victoria's posture stiffen slightly. "Sarah came to me a few days ago with some information about the fertility clinic. She's claiming there was a mistake with the samples, that Oliver might actually be mine biologically." Victoria's face remained carefully neutral, but I caught a brief flash of panic in her eyes before she masked it. "Really? That seems like a convenient story. What kind of mistake?" "Something about mislabeled samples," Daniel continued, playing his part perfectly. "She has documentation from someone at the clinic, but I don't know if I should believe her. It could be her trying to manipulate me into coming back. I wanted your opinion since you work in medical administration. Does this kind of error actually happen?" "I mean, mistakes happen in any medical setting," Victoria said carefully, "but fertility clinics are usually very precise with their protocols. It seems unlikely." "That's what I thought," Daniel agreed, "but Sarah seems really convinced. She wants me to get a paternity test done to prove Oliver is mine." "And you're considering it?" Victoria asked, her voice tight. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me thinks she's desperate and willing to say anything. What do you think I should do?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, and I could practically see the calculations running through her mind. If Daniel got a paternity test, her entire scheme would unravel, but if she discouraged him too strongly, he might get suspicious. She was trapped between exposing herself and maintaining her deception. "I think," Victoria finally said, "that you need to be very careful. Sarah hurt you deeply. She might be using this supposed mistake as a way to worm back into your life. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment." "You're right," Daniel said. "Hey, you know what? It's beautiful outside. Want to sit on the patio while we talk more? I could use the fresh air." Victoria agreed, and they headed toward the back of the house. As soon as they stepped outside and I heard the patio door close, I moved quickly but quietly up the stairs. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Victoria's bedroom was exactly as Daniel had described. Pristine white furniture, expensive bedding, everything coordinated perfectly. I went straight to the closet, pushing aside designer clothes that still had price tags attached. The safe was exactly where Daniel said it would be, a small digital model tucked behind a stack of shoeboxes. I entered the combination with shaking fingers. 0823. The safe beeped once, and the door clicked open. Inside were several items: jewelry, some cash, important documents, and 3 leather-bound journals stacked neatly on top of each other. I grabbed the most recent one, dated from this year, and started flipping through pages. Victoria's handwriting was precise and neat, organized by date with meticulous detail about her daily activities. I scanned through entries from the past year, looking for anything relevant. January was mostly complaints about work and money troubles. February mentioned Daniel and me in passing, noting that we seemed happy and that our IVF procedure was coming up. Then I found March, March, and everything changed. March 15th, I read under my breath, my hands trembling. Danny told me today that Sarah is pregnant. The IVF worked. I should be happy for him, but all I can think about is that trust fund. If he stays married to her until 35, I lose half my share. That's $2.3 million that should be mine. Mom and Dad always loved him more, always gave him everything. For once, I should get what I deserve. I kept reading, my stomach turning with each entry. March 23rd, I've been thinking about Danny's situation. What if the baby wasn't his? What if he thought Sarah had cheated somehow? He'd divorce her instantly. He's so rigid about loyalty. But how could I make that happen? April 2nd, I remembered that Ryan Collins used to date Sarah. He donated sperm at Riverside Fertility a few years ago for his sister's IVF. What if Sarah's embryo was created with Ryan's sample instead of Danny's? That would be grounds for divorce, but the procedure is already done, unless I could make Danny think it wasn't done correctly. April 7th, I met with Jennifer Harlow today. She works at the fertility clinic and is Ryan Collins' cousin. I offered her $20,000 to tell Ryan about a sample mix-up once Sarah gives birth. She seemed hesitant, but agreed when I explained it was about giving Ryan the chance to know his biological child. She doesn't need to know the real reason. I photographed every relevant page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to steady them against my knee. The entries continued through the pregnancy, detailing how Victoria had accessed the medical systems using stolen credentials, how she'd altered the digital records to make it look like Ryan's sample had been used, how she'd falsified Daniel's initial fertility tests to push us toward IVF in the first place. It was all there, every step of her conspiracy, written in her own hand. April 28th, I changed the sample designation in Sarah's file today, used Dr. Webb's login credentials that I pulled from the administrative system. No one will ever know it was me. When the baby is born and Jennifer tells Ryan about the mix-up, Danny will think Sarah's child isn't his. He'll leave her. He'll divorce her before turning 35, and I'll finally get what I deserve. The final entries from after Oliver's birth were even more damning. July 10th, it worked. Danny left Sarah at the hospital. He called me crying, saying he couldn't look at the baby without seeing betrayal. I comforted him, told him he was doing the right thing. In a few months, once the divorce is final, I'll have access to half his trust fund, $2.3 million to pay off my debts and finally live the life I deserve. Sarah and that baby can fend for themselves. Danny was always too good for her anyway. I photographed everything, then carefully returned the journal to the safe exactly as I'd found it. My hands were shaking with rage as I closed the safe door and reset the combination. Victoria had written out her entire evil plan like it was something to be proud of, like destroying her brother's marriage and causing him to abandon his newborn son was just a business transaction. I made my way back downstairs, slipping out the front door and circling around to the back patio where Daniel and Victoria were still talking. Through the glass door, I could see Daniel was doing an excellent job of keeping Victoria engaged, asking her opinion about various aspects of his life, playing the role of confused brother seeking guidance. I knocked on the patio door, and they both looked up. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, opening the door. "But Daniel, I think we should get going. We have that appointment in an hour, remember?" Daniel stood immediately, reading the meaning in my expression. "Right, yeah, thanks for the talk, Vic. It really helped." Victoria walked us to the front door, her smile still plastered on her face even though I could see the tension in her shoulders. She suspected something wasn't quite right, but she couldn't figure out what. "Take care of yourself, Danny," she said, giving him another hug, "and think carefully about what I said. Don't let anyone manipulate you." "I won't," Daniel promised, and the irony of those words seemed lost on Victoria. As soon as we were in the car and driving away, Daniel turned to me with desperate eyes. "Did you find anything?" "Everything," I said, pulling out my phone to show him the photographs. She documented the entire conspiracy in her journal. Every step, every motive, every lie. It's all here in her own handwriting. Daniel pulled over to the side of the road so he could read through the photos properly. With each entry, his face grew darker, his jaw clenching tighter. By the time he finished, he was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles had turned white. "She destroyed our family for money," he said, his voice hollow. "She made me abandon my son, made me believe the worst of you, all so she could get half of a trust fund I don't even care about. But now we have proof," I said quietly. "Now we can make sure she pays for what she did." Daniel looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe we could fix this disaster, that maybe our family had a chance after all. "Let's go to the police," he said, pulling back onto the road. "Detective Park needs to see this immediately." Detective Park's reaction to the journal entries was everything we'd hoped for. She called in additional officers, had the photos authenticated and added to the case file, and immediately began the process of obtaining a warrant for Victoria's arrest. "This is exactly what we needed," she told us. "With this documentation combined with Jennifer Harlow's testimony and the digital evidence of system access, we have a solid case for fraud, conspiracy, and illegal access to medical records. Ms. Mitchell is going to face serious charges." "How long until she's arrested?" Daniel asked. "We'll execute the warrant tomorrow morning," Detective Park replied. "I want to make sure everything is airtight before we bring her in. In the meantime, do not contact her or let her know that you've been here. We can't risk her destroying evidence or fleeing." We agreed and left the police station. In the car, Daniel turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask this after everything I put you through," he began. "But when this is over, when Victoria is held accountable for what she did, can we try again? Can we try to rebuild our family?" I looked at him for a long moment, thinking about Oliver sleeping peacefully at Melissa's house, about the 3 months of loneliness and struggle I'd endured, about the man who had abandoned me in my moment of greatest need. But I also thought about the evidence of Victoria's manipulation, about how thoroughly she'd poisoned Daniel's mind against me, about how quickly he'd come back once he knew the truth. We can try, I finally said. But Daniel, trust isn't rebuilt overnight. You left us when things got hard. You believed the worst without giving me a chance to explain. That hurt me more than I can describe. If we're going to make this work, you need to prove that you're committed for the long haul, not just until the next crisis. I will, he promised. I swear to you, Sarah, I will spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of being Oliver's father and your husband. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Victoria was arrested at 6 a.m. the following morning. Detective Hart called us at 7 to let us know they'd executed the warrant without incident. Victoria had been taken into custody, her house was being searched, and they'd already recovered the journals as evidence. She was being held pending arraignment, charged with medical fraud, conspiracy, illegal access to computer systems, and falsification of medical records. She's asking for her lawyer, Detective Hart informed us. But with the evidence we have, I'm confident the charges will stick. The district attorney is already talking about a plea bargain, but we'll see. Your sister-in-law is looking at serious prison time. After the call ended, Daniel sat on our couch with his head in his hands. I can't believe this is real, he said. My sister is going to prison. She earned it, I replied, though I felt no satisfaction in saying it. She destroyed lives for money, Daniel. She deserves whatever she gets. Oliver started crying from upstairs, and I went to get him. When I came back down, Daniel was standing by the window, staring out at nothing. I handed him our son, and he held Oliver close, breathing in that sweet baby smell. I missed so much, Daniel whispered. 3 months of his life that I can never get back. His first smile, the first time he laughed, all those little moments, because I believed my sister over my wife. You didn't know, I said, though part of me was still angry about it. Victoria was convincing. She had evidence that seemed irrefutable, but I should have trusted you, Daniel insisted. I should have asked questions, demanded a paternity test immediately instead of just walking away. I was a coward, Sarah, and I'm so sorry. Over the next few days, the story broke in the local news. Medical fraud case involves falsified fertility records. The details were vague enough to protect our privacy, but everyone in our social circle quickly figured out who was involved. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned friends, from family members wanting to know if the rumors were true, from reporters trying to get a statement. Daniel's parents flew in from Florida, horrified by what their daughter had done. His mother cried when she held Oliver for the first time, apologizing over and over for not seeing what Victoria was capable of. His father just looked broken, unable to comprehend how he'd raised a child capable of such calculated cruelty. We had no idea she was in that kind of financial trouble, Daniel's mother said as we sat in my living room. She always seemed so put together, so successful. If we'd known she was drowning in debt, we would have helped her. This isn't your fault, I told her gently. Victoria made her own choices. She chose greed over family. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after Victoria's arrest. Daniel and I both had to give statements, detailing the timeline of events and the impact of Victoria's actions on our family. Jennifer Harlow also testified, looking miserable as she explained her role in the conspiracy. Victoria sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her usual immaculate appearance replaced by dark circles under her eyes and unwashed hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wouldn't look at Daniel or me throughout the entire hearing, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. The judge reviewed the evidence, the journal entries that Victoria herself had written, the digital forensics showing her access to the medical systems, Jennifer's testimony about the payment arrangement. When he announced that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, Victoria finally reacted. She stood up abruptly, turning to look directly at Daniel. I did this for you, she said, her voice cracking. I did this because you deserve better than her. She was never good enough for our family, Danny. I was trying to help you. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. Daniel stood up beside me, his face pale but his voice steady when he spoke. You didn't do this for me, he said. You did it for yourself, for money. You destroyed my family, Victoria. You made me abandon my son. Don't you dare try to justify that as helping me. Victoria's face crumpled and she sank back into her chair as her lawyer tried to quiet her. The judge ordered a recess and bailiffs led Victoria back to holding. I watched her go, feeling nothing but emptiness where anger should have been. Are you okay? I asked Daniel as we left the courthouse. No, he admitted, but I will be. We will be. Ryan Collins contacted me a week after the hearing. I'd been expecting it, honestly, but that didn't make the conversation any easier. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a park near the hospital where Oliver was born. Daniel offered to come with me, but I told him this was something I needed to handle alone. Ryan was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench overlooking a pond. He stood when he saw me approaching, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I know this is complicated. That's an understatement, I replied, sitting down on the opposite end of the bench. What do you want, Ryan? I want to know where we stand, he said. With Oliver. Legally, biologically, he's my son. But I also know you and Daniel are trying to work things out. I don't want to make things harder for you, but I also can't just pretend I don't have a child out there. I'd thought about this conversation a lot over the past few weeks, about what I would say if Ryan pressed his parental rights. The truth was, I didn't have a good answer. The situation is complicated, I finally said. Yes, Oliver is biologically yours because of the clinic's error, an error that Victoria deliberately caused. But Daniel has been Oliver's father in every way that matters for the past month. He's the one getting up for midnight feedings, changing diapers, singing lullabies. He's building a relationship with his son. His son, Ryan repeated quietly, not mine. I didn't didn't mean it like that, I started, but Ryan held up a hand. No, you're right. Daniel is Oliver's father. I'm just the guy whose genetic material was used by mistake. But Sarah, doesn't that give me any rights? Don't I get to know my son? I don't know, I admitted honestly. This is territory I never thought I'd be navigating. You could petition for custody or visitation rights. You'd probably win at least partial custody given the biological connection. But is that really what you want? To force your way into a child's life because of a medical error? Ryan was quiet for a long time, staring out at the pond. I never wanted kids, he finally said. That's why my relationship with you didn't work out, remember? You wanted marriage and family, and I wanted freedom. But when Jennifer told me about Oliver, when I saw him in that hospital room, something changed. I felt this connection I didn't expect. That doesn't mean you're ready to be a father, I pointed out. Having a biological connection and being a parent are two very different things. I know, Ryan agreed. And honestly, I don't think I am ready. But I also don't want to walk away completely. Is there a middle ground here? Some way I can be part of Oliver's life without disrupting yours? I thought about it carefully. What if we arranged occasional visits, once a month or so, supervised at first? You could see Oliver, spend time with him, but without the pressure of being a full-time father. And as he grows up, we can explain the situation honestly. Let him decide for himself what kind of relationship he wants with you. You'd be willing to do that? Ryan asked, surprise evident in his voice. Even after everything that's happened? For Oliver's sake, yes, I said. Because someday he's going to have questions about his biology, about where he came from, and I'd rather have you be a part of his life in a healthy, limited way than have him grow up wondering why his biological father wanted nothing to do with him. Ryan nodded slowly. Okay, once a month, supervised. I can work with that. Thank you, Sarah, for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet, I warned him. If you do anything to hurt Oliver or disrupt his life with Daniel and me, this arrangement ends immediately. Understood? Understood, Ryan agreed. We worked out the details over the next few weeks, with lawyers drawing up an agreement that gave Ryan limited supervised visitation rights while maintaining Daniel's full parental rights and custody. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best we could do given the complicated circumstances. Daniel struggled with the arrangement at first. The idea of Ryan being in Oliver's life, even in a limited capacity, clearly bothered him, but he also understood that legally, we couldn't just cut Ryan out completely without a lengthy custody battle that would hurt everyone involved. I don't like it, Daniel admitted one night as we sat together on the couch, Oliver asleep between us. But I understand why it's necessary, and I trust you to make decisions that are best for Oliver. That trust, that willingness to accept a difficult situation for the sake of our son, meant more to me than Daniel probably realized. It was evidence that he was trying to be better, to be the partner I needed him to be. Victoria's trial was scheduled for 3 months after her arrest. In that time, Daniel moved back into our house. We didn't share a bedroom yet. That level of intimacy felt too soon after everything that had happened, but we lived together as co-parents to Oliver. Slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding the trust that Victoria had destroyed. There were good days and bad days. Days when I watched Daniel with Oliver and felt my heart swell with love for both of them. And days when I remembered the hospital room, remembered being abandoned when I needed him most, and the anger came flooding back. I know you're still hurting, Daniel said one evening after I'd snapped at him over something minor, and you have every right to be. I don't expect you to just forgive and forget. I'm trying, I said, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. But Daniel, it's hard. Every time I look at you, part of me remembers being alone in that hospital room, holding our newborn son while you walked away. How do I get past that? Maybe you don't, Daniel suggested quietly. Maybe that's something we both have to live with. The knowledge that I failed you when you needed me most. But Sarah, I'm here now. I'm fighting for us. Doesn't that count for something? It does, I admitted. It counts for a lot. I just need time. The trial lasted 5 days. The prosecution laid out Victoria's entire scheme, from the falsified fertility tests to the altered medical records to the payment to Jennifer Harlow. They presented the journal entries, which Victoria's lawyer tried unsuccessfully to have excluded as evidence. They called witnesses, including Dr. Webb, who testified about the breach of his login credentials, and hospital administrators who explained the seriousness of Victoria's access violations. On the 3rd day, Daniel took a stand. He had to relive the day of Oliver's birth, had to explain how he'd felt seeing Ryan in the delivery room, how he'd made the decision to leave. I watched from the gallery as he broke down describing the pain of those 3 months apart from his son. I believed my sister, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I trusted her completely. She'd always been there for me, or so I thought. When she suggested that Sarah might be trying to manipulate me with lies about a clinic error, I believed her. I thought she was protecting me. I had no idea she was the one destroying my family. Victoria sat through the entire trial with barely any expression, her face a careful mask. But when Daniel testified, when he described the devastation her actions had caused, I saw something crack in her composure. Tears started falling, though whether they were tears of remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. I testified on the 4th day, describing the pregnancy, the IVF process, and the absolute shock of having Ryan appear in my delivery room. I explained the 3 months of struggling alone with a newborn while trying to process the betrayal and abandonment. I held it together until the prosecutor asked me to describe the moment I realized Victoria had engineered everything deliberately. It felt like being betrayed all over again, I said, my voice breaking. To know that someone I'd welcomed into my family, someone I'd trusted, had been working to destroy my marriage from the beginning. She didn't care about the baby she was hurting, didn't care about the family she was tearing apart. She only cared about money. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, Victoria finally finally broke down completely, sobbing as the judge read the verdict. Her parents were in the courtroom, both of them crying as well, but there was no sympathy in Daniel's face, only grim satisfaction that justice was being served. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Victoria remained in custody, deemed a flight risk given the severity of her crimes. Daniel and I went home to Oliver, to the life we were slowly rebuilding, and tried to process everything that had happened. "It's over," Daniel said that night as we sat together in Oliver's nursery, watching our son sleep. "She's been found guilty. She's going to prison. It's finally over." "It's not over," I corrected gently. "This is just the beginning. We still have to figure out how to move forward, how to be a family again after everything that's happened. That's going to take time." "I have time," Daniel said, reaching for my hand. "However long it takes, Sarah, I'm not going anywhere." For the first time since that terrible day in the hospital, I believed him. Victoria's sentencing hearing arrived on a cold morning in late October. Oliver was 4 months old by then, a happy baby who smiled easily and was just starting to laugh. Daniel and I had made progress in our reconciliation, though we still hadn't fully repaired everything Victoria had broken between us. We attended the hearing together, united in our desire to see justice served. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and family members. Victoria's parents sat on one side, looking older and more fragile than I remembered. Daniel and I sat across from them, with Melissa beside me for support. Ryan had sent a message saying he supported whatever sentence the judge deemed appropriate, but didn't feel it was his place to attend. Victoria was brought in wearing the same orange jumpsuit she'd worn throughout the trial. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and pale. When her eyes met Daniel's, I saw her mouth something that looked like, "I'm sorry," but Daniel's expression remained hard and unforgiving. The prosecutor went first, arguing for the maximum sentence allowed under the law. "Victoria Mitchell engaged in a calculated conspiracy spanning several months," he stated. "She illegally accessed medical systems, falsified records, manipulated her own brother, and caused immeasurable harm to an innocent family. Her actions were motivated purely by greed, by a desire to access money she felt entitled to. She showed no remorse until she was caught, and even then her regrets seemed focused on the consequences to herself rather than the pain she caused others." Victoria's defense attorney tried to paint a more sympathetic picture. "My client made terrible decisions driven by desperation and financial hardship," he argued. "She deeply regrets her actions and the pain they caused her family. She's a first-time offender with an otherwise clean record who made catastrophic mistakes. She's willing to make restitution and accept responsibility for what she's done." Then it was time for victim impact statements. Daniel went first, standing at the podium with a paper in his shaking hands. He'd written out what he wanted to say, afraid he'd lose his composure otherwise. "Victoria is my sister," Daniel began, his voice steady, despite the emotion behind it. "Growing up, she was my best friend. We protected each other, supported each other, loved each other, or at least I thought we did. I never imagined she was capable of the cruelty she showed when she decided my marriage was worth less than money." He paused, looking directly at Victoria, who had started crying silently. "Because of your actions, I abandoned my newborn son in a hospital room. I walked away from my wife when she needed me most. I missed the first 3 months of Oliver's life because you convinced me he wasn't mine. Those are moments I can never get back, Victoria. First that are gone forever. And you did that deliberately, knowing exactly what pain you were causing." Victoria's sobs grew louder, but Daniel continued. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Sarah, who trusted you as family. You hurt Oliver, who will grow up knowing his aunt tried to destroy his parents' marriage before he was even born. You hurt Mom and Dad, who have to live with the shame of what their daughter did. All of that destruction, all of that pain for $2.3 million that you would have received anyway eventually." Daniel folded his paper, his hands still shaking. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. Right now, the sister I thought I knew feels like a stranger. Someone I loved turned out to be someone capable of monstrous things. That betrayal hurts almost as much as losing those months with my son." When Daniel returned to his seat, I stood to give my statement. I hadn't written anything down, feeling like I needed to speak from my heart rather than from a prepared speech. "I don't have much to add to what Daniel said," I began, "except to say that Victoria's betrayal extends beyond just one family. She violated the trust we place in medical systems, in the people who handle our most intimate healthcare decisions. She proved that when given access to sensitive information, she was willing to weaponize it for personal gain. That's a violation not just of us, but of every patient who trusts that their medical records are secure." I looked at Victoria, who was staring at me with red, swollen eyes. "I pity you," I said honestly, "because you traded everything real for something temporary. You destroyed relationships that could have sustained you through life's actual hardships for money that would have eventually been gone. And now you're left with nothing. No family who trusts you, no career, no freedom, nothing. That's the consequences of your choices, Victoria. That's what greed cost you." After we finished, Victoria's lawyer asked if she could make a statement. The judge allowed it, and Victoria stood shakily, her voice barely audible as she spoke. "I know nothing I say can undo what I've done," she began, her words coming out between sobs. "I know sorry isn't enough. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you all to know that I never meant for things to go this far. I never intended to cause this much pain." "But you did intend it," Daniel interrupted, standing up. "You documented every step in your journal, Victoria. You planned it meticulously. Don't stand there and claim it was an accident or that you didn't mean for it to happen. You meant every bit of it." The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Mitchell, please sit down." "Ms. Mitchell, continue." Victoria wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "I was drowning in debt. I was desperate. I made terrible choices because I was scared and stupid and selfish. I know that now. I wish I could take it all back. Wish I could erase the pain I caused, but I can't. All I can do is accept whatever punishment the court decides and try to somehow make amends, even though I know that's probably impossible. The judge reviewed the case details, the evidence, the testimony. When he finally announced the sentence, his voice was grave and firm. Victoria Mitchell, you have been found guilty of medical fraud, conspiracy, unauthorized access to computer systems, and falsification of medical records. These are serious crimes that strike at the heart of patient trust and medical integrity. You abused your position in the medical field, violated your brother's trust, and caused immeasurable harm to an innocent family, including a newborn child. He paused, looking directly at Victoria. The court recognizes that you are a first-time offender experiencing genuine remorse. However, the calculated nature of your crimes, the extended period over which they were committed, and the severity of harm caused require significant consequences. I hereby sentence you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $100,000 to cover legal fees, therapy costs, and damages to the Mitchell family. 8 years. Victoria would be in her early 40s when she was released. Her career in medical administration was over, her reputation destroyed, her relationship with her family shattered beyond repair. The weight of her crimes had caught up with her, and the price was steep. As bailiffs led Victoria away, she looked back at Daniel one last time. I love you, Danny, she said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Daniel didn't respond. He just stood there, stone-faced, watching his sister disappear through the doors to begin her prison sentence. When we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us with cameras and questions. Daniel made a brief statement. Justice has been served today, he said simply. My family can now begin the process of healing from the trauma my sister caused. We ask for privacy as we move forward with rebuilding our lives. That night, back at home with Oliver sleeping peacefully in his crib, Daniel and I finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for months. Where do we go from here? I asked as we sat together on the couch. Victoria's been sentenced. The divorce proceedings have been frozen. We're living together again. But Daniel, what are we actually doing? Are we married? Separated? In some kind of limbo? Daniel took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I want us to be married, he said. Really married, not just legally. I want us to be partners, to trust each other, to build a life together. But I know I damaged that trust when I left. I know I hurt you in ways that might never fully heal. So I'm asking Sarah, what do you want? I thought about it carefully. About the man who had abandoned me and the man who had fought to make things right. About the husband who had failed me and the father who showed up every day for his son. About the marriage we'd had and the one we might still build. I want to try, I finally said. But Daniel, we need counseling. Real, intensive marriage counseling. Because there's so much hurt here, so much resentment and broken trust. I can't just forgive and forget because Victoria's gone to prison. The wounds she caused, they're still here. Then we'll go to counseling. Daniel agreed immediately. As many sessions as it takes. Whatever you need to feel safe with me again, to trust me again, I'll do it. We started therapy the following week with Dr. Patricia Coleman, a marriage counselor who specialized in trauma and betrayal. The first few sessions were brutal, with me finally expressing all the anger and hurt I'd been holding back. I yelled at Daniel, cried, made him understand just how devastated I'd been when he walked away. You didn't even give me a chance, I sobbed during our third session. You looked at Oliver and saw a stranger instead of our son. You believed Victoria's lies without even questioning them. How am I supposed to trust that you won't do that again the next time something difficult happens? Daniel listened, really listened, without getting defensive or making excuses. You're right, he said quietly. I failed you completely. I let my hurt and confusion override everything I knew about you, about us. I can't promise I'll be perfect going forward, but I can promise that I'll never abandon you like that again. I'll fight for us, Sarah, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Dr. Coleman helped us establish new patterns of communication, new ways of handling conflict and stress. She taught us how to rebuild trust incrementally through consistent actions rather than grand gestures. Slowly, painfully, we started to heal. Ryan's monthly visits with Oliver continued, always supervised either by me or by Daniel. To my surprise, Ryan proved to be respectful of boundaries and genuinely interested in Oliver's well-being without trying to overstep his role. He brought age-appropriate toys, asked about Oliver's development milestones, and never pressured us for more time than we'd agreed upon. He's a good kid, Ryan said during one visit when Oliver was 6 months old. You and Daniel are doing a great job with him. Thank you, I replied, watching Ryan gently hold Oliver while Daniel supervised from across the room. I appreciate you respecting our boundaries. I know this situation can't be easy for you. It's not, Ryan admitted, but I realized something after the trial, after seeing what Victoria's selfishness did to your family. Being a parent isn't about what you want or what you're entitled to. It's about what's best for the child. And what's best for Oliver is having stable parents who love him and a biological father who doesn't complicate their lives unnecessarily. That mature perspective helped ease some of Daniel's concerns about Ryan's involvement. The three of us even managed to have civil conversations about Oliver's future, about how we'd explain the situation to him when he was old enough to understand. By Oliver's first birthday, Daniel and I had made significant progress in our reconciliation. We'd moved back into the same bedroom, though intimacy was still cautious and tentative. We'd established new traditions as a family, new patterns that weren't tainted by Victoria's manipulation, and most importantly, we'd learned to talk to each other honestly about our fears and hurts rather than letting them fester. The birthday party was small, just close friends and family. Daniel's parents came, looking healthier than they had at Victoria's sentencing. They'd both aged visibly from the stress of having a daughter in prison, but they were trying to move forward and rebuild their relationship with Daniel and me. "Thank you for letting us be part of Oliver's life," Daniel's mother said as she helped me set up decorations. "After what Victoria did, we wouldn't have blamed you for cutting us out completely. You're not responsible for her choices," I assured her, "and Oliver deserves to know his grandparents." As we watched Oliver smash his first birthday cake, his chubby hands covered in blue frosting, his laugh filling the room, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Not perfect happiness. There were still scars and challenges ahead, but peace with where we were and hope for where we were going. Daniel caught my eye across the room and smiled, and I smiled back. We'd survived Victoria's betrayal. We'd fought for our family and won. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Reconciliation never is, but we were walking it together, and that made all the difference. 2 years after Victoria's sentencing, life had settled into a new normal that felt both familiar and entirely different from what we'd had before. Oliver was nearly 3 years old, a bright, energetic toddler who loved dinosaurs and insisted on wearing his rain boots everywhere, even on sunny days. Daniel and I had fully reconciled, our marriage stronger for having survived Victoria's betrayal and our own failures. We'd moved to a new house about 6 months after Oliver's first birthday. The old house held too many painful memories, too many ghosts of the life we'd almost lost. This new place was ours in a way the old one had never been, purchased with money from Daniel's trust fund that had finally been released when he turned 35. Ironically, Victoria had ended up in prison for money she would have eventually received anyway if she'd just waited and maintained her relationship with Daniel. The divorce papers that had been filed in the hospital were formally withdrawn, and we'd renewed our vows in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. It wasn't about the grand gesture. It was about recommitting to each other with clear eyes and honest hearts, knowing exactly what we'd survived together. Ryan continued his monthly visits with Oliver, though they'd evolved into a comfortable routine that felt less like obligation and more like extended family. He'd started dating someone seriously, a kindergarten teacher named Amanda who was patient with the complicated situation and genuinely kind to Oliver during the few times they'd met. Ryan had never pushed for more custody or tried to disrupt Oliver's life, and for that I was grateful. He asked about the situation yesterday, I told Daniel one evening after Oliver had gone to bed. Not directly, but he was looking at photos and pointed to one of Ryan. Asked who he was. Daniel looked up from the legal brief he'd been reviewing for work. "What did you say?" "I told him Ryan was a friend of ours who likes to visit," I replied. "He's too young to understand the full story. But Daniel, we're going to have to tell him eventually. Probably sooner rather than later." "I know," Daniel sighed. "I've been thinking about that too. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Coleman about the best way to approach it." We scheduled a session with our therapist, who we still saw monthly for maintenance even though our marriage was in a much healthier place. Dr. Coleman helped us develop an age-appropriate way to explain the situation to Oliver, emphasizing that he was loved by many people and that families came in all different forms. When we finally had the conversation with Oliver a few weeks later, he listened with the serious expression he got when concentrating hard on something new. We kept it simple, explaining that sometimes doctors made mistakes and used the wrong material to help make babies, and that's what had happened with him. We told him that Daniel was his daddy in every way that mattered, but that Ryan was also special because he'd helped make Oliver, even if it was by accident. "So, I have 2 daddies?" Oliver asked, his face scrunched up in confusion. "You have 1 daddy," Daniel clarified gently, pulling Oliver onto his lap. "That's me. But Ryan is like a special uncle who cares about you very much." "Oh," Oliver said, processing this. Then, with the quick subject changes typical of toddlers, he asked if he could have a snack and the conversation was over. It wouldn't always be that simple, we knew. As Oliver grew older, he'd have more questions, more complicated feelings about his origins. But for now, he was satisfied with the explanation, and that was enough. Victoria was a subject we approached carefully around Oliver. He knew he had an Aunt Victoria who lived far away and couldn't visit, but we didn't explain why. That conversation would come later, when he was old enough to understand concepts like prison and betrayal, and the sometimes ugly complications of family. Daniel had visited Victoria exactly once since her sentencing, about a year into her prison term. He'd gone alone, needing closure without me or his parents present. He came home quiet and reflective, spending a long time holding Oliver that night. "How was it?" I'd asked, not sure I really wanted to know. "She looks different," Daniel said. "Older, harder. Prison isn't kind to anyone." She asked about Oliver, about you, about Mom and Dad. She wanted to know if there was any chance of forgiveness. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I was working on forgiveness for my own sake, not for hers," Daniel replied. "That I needed to let go of the anger because carrying it was poisoning me. But that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what she did or welcoming her back into our lives. She destroyed too much for that." Daniel's parents visited Victoria regularly, their parental love apparently stronger than their disappointment in her actions. They never pressured Daniel to visit or to bring Oliver, understanding that some wounds cut too deep for forced reconciliation. But they shared updates occasionally, letting us know that Victoria was working in the prison library and had started taking online college courses in business administration, apparently trying to build some kind of future for after her release. "She wants to write you a letter," Daniel's mother mentioned during one Sunday dinner at our house. "She's been working with a therapist in prison on taking real accountability for what she did. The letter is part of that process." Daniel and I exchanged glances. "I don't know if we're ready for that," I said carefully. "Maybe someday, but not now." "I understand," she replied. "I'll let her know." The letter arrived anyway, about 3 months later. Victoria had apparently sent it directly, rather than going through her parents. Daniel and I stared at the envelope for days before finally opening it together one evening after Oliver was asleep. The letter was long, spanning several handwritten pages in Victoria's precise script. She wrote about her time in prison, about the therapy she'd been attending, about the deep shame she felt for what she'd done. She described in detail the financial pressures that had driven her decisions, though she was careful to note that pressure didn't excuse her actions. I destroyed my own family for money I would have eventually received anyway, she wrote. I can't adequately express how that realization haunts me every single day. I traded real relationships, genuine love, and the trust of people who cared about me for temporary financial relief. And now I have neither the money nor the family. The letter went on for pages, apologizing specifically for each aspect of her betrayal, for falsifying the fertility records, for manipulating Jennifer Harlow, for poisoning Daniel's mind against me, for causing him to abandon Oliver in the hospital. She acknowledged that no apology could undo the damage, but she needed us to know that she understood the full scope of what she'd taken from us. I don't expect forgiveness, the letter concluded. I don't deserve it, but I hope that someday, maybe when Oliver is grown, you might allow me to meet him. Not as his aunt, I forfeited that role, but as someone who wants to tell him how sorry I am for trying to destroy his family before he was even born. That's all I can hope for now. Whatever small mercy you might grant me decades from now. I set the letter down, my hands trembling. Daniel had tears running down his face, though whether they were from anger or sadness or some complicated mix of both, I couldn't tell. What do you want to do? I asked him. I don't know, Daniel admitted. Part of me wants to write back and tell her all over again how much she hurt us, but another part just feels tired. Tired of being angry, tired of carrying this weight. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not saying what she did was okay, but deciding not to let it define us anymore. We talked late into the night about what forgiveness meant, about whether it was something we owed Victoria or something we needed for ourselves. Eventually, we decided to write a response, not because Victoria deserved one, but because we needed to articulate where we stood. Daniel drafted the letter over several days, showing me each version until we both agreed it said what needed to be said. The final version was brief and direct. Victoria, we received your letter and appreciate that you've taken time to reflect on your actions. You're right that your apologies can't undo the damage you caused. The 3 months Oliver spent without his father, the trust you destroyed between us, the pain you inflicted on our family, those are permanent scars. However, we're choosing to move forward with our lives without the weight of anger toward you. This isn't forgiveness in the sense of absolving you or welcoming you back into our family. It's simply us deciding that you've taken enough from us, and we won't give you any more of our peace or happiness. When Oliver is an adult, old enough to make his own decisions about relationships, we'll tell him the full truth about what happened. At that point, if he chooses to have contact with you, we won't prevent it. But until then, we ask that you respect our boundaries and allow us to raise our son without your presence in our lives. We wish you whatever peace you can find in your own journey, but that journey doesn't intersect with ours anymore. We mailed the letter and felt lighter for having set that final boundary. Victoria never responded, and we heard through Daniel's parents that she'd accepted our decision without argument. Life moved forward in the way it does, with everyday challenges and joys that had nothing to do with Victoria or her betrayal. Oliver started preschool and made friends, developed a fascination with space that had him insisting on sleeping under glow-in-the-dark stars every night. Daniel got promoted at work, and I went back to my job as a physical therapist part-time, finding satisfaction in helping others heal, even as I continued healing myself. Melissa remained my closest friend, the one who'd stood by me through the darkest times. She was Oliver's godmother and the person I called when I needed to talk through the complicated feelings that still surfaced sometimes about everything we'd survived. Do you think you'll ever fully get over what happened? She asked one afternoon as we watched Oliver play at the park. I don't think you get over betrayal like that, I admitted. You just learn to live with it, to integrate it into your story without letting it control your present. Victoria took 3 months of Oliver's infancy from Daniel and me. She damaged our marriage in ways that required years of work to repair. But she didn't win, Melissa. We're still here, still together, still a family. That's what matters. On Oliver's 3rd birthday, as we celebrated with friends and family, I watched Daniel chase our son around the backyard, both of them laughing as Oliver shrieked with delight. Ryan was there too, keeping a respectful distance, but smiling at Oliver's joy. Daniel's parents were helping set up the piñata, their relationship with us slowly healing over time and shared love for their grandson. This was our family now. Complicated, imperfect, but real. Built not on the illusion of perfection, but on the solid foundation of having survived real trials together and chosen to keep choosing each other every day. That evening, after the guests had left and Oliver was asleep, Daniel and I stood in the doorway of his room watching him breathe peacefully. I was thinking, Daniel said quietly, about what Victoria took from us and what she couldn't take. She took 3 months, but she couldn't take this. This life we built, this family we fought for. This is ours, Sarah. Really ours in a way it might not have been if we hadn't had to fight for it. He was right. The betrayal had nearly destroyed us, but surviving it together had forged something stronger than what we'd had before. We'd learned that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice you made repeatedly, especially when things got hard. We'd learned to communicate honestly, to trust carefully but genuinely, to forgive not because people deserved it, but because we deserved peace. Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if Victoria hadn't done what she did? I asked. Sometimes, Daniel admitted, but then I realized that the people we are now, the marriage we have now, it came from surviving that. I'm not grateful for what she did, but I'm grateful for who we became in spite of it. We stood there a while longer, watching our son sleep, listening listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling around us. Somewhere in a prison several hours away, Victoria was living with the consequences of her choices. But here, in this moment, she was just a shadow in our past, no longer able to touch the light we'd built for our future. And that finally was what real victory looked like. Not revenge or punishment or even traditional forgiveness, just the simple, profound act of moving forward, of building happiness in spite of those who'd tried to destroy it, of choosing love and trust even when they'd been weaponized against us. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still moments when old hurts surfaced, when trust wavered, when the memory of abandonment stung fresh and new. But we faced those moments together now, with honesty and commitment and the bone-deep knowledge that we'd already survived the worst and come out stronger. As we finally left Oliver's room and headed to our own bedroom, Daniel took my hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance. For fighting for us when it would have been easier to walk away. For being stronger than I was when it mattered most." I squeezed his hand, thinking about all the ways we'd both been strong and weak, had both failed and succeeded in the years since Oliver's birth. "We gave each other second chances," I corrected. "That's what family does. Real family, not the kind Victoria thought we were." We'd learned the hard way that family wasn't just about blood or legal ties or even love. It was about showing up, especially when things got difficult. It was about trust earned through consistent actions, not demanded through obligation. It was about choosing each other, day after day, through all the messy, complicated, beautiful realities of building a life together. Victoria had tried to destroy that. She'd weaponized systems meant to help families and relationships meant to support them. She'd calculated that money mattered more than love, that temporary gain was worth permanent loss, and she'd been spectacularly wrong. The family she'd tried to shatter had reformed stronger. The marriage she'd tried to end had survived, and the nephew she'd callously disregarded was thriving, surrounded by people who fought to keep him. That night, as I drifted off to sleep next to my husband with our son sleeping peacefully down the hall, I realized that this was what happiness looked like after trauma. Not the absence of pain or the erasure of difficult memories, but the presence of peace hard-won and carefully maintained. The knowledge that we'd faced the worst and chosen each other anyway. The quiet confidence that came from surviving betrayal and deciding it wouldn't define us. Victoria's story ended with prison and isolation, with the permanent loss of family and the hollow victory of knowing she'd destroyed herself in pursuit of money that wouldn't have made her happy anyway. But our story, the story of our family, continued forward into a future we were building one choice at a time. And that future was bright, not because it was free from challenges, but because we'd proven we could ace them together.